Hello and welcome to MBA Waves. We are on the air. My name is Eric Lucrezi, your host for today, joined as usual by my fellow co-founder of MBA Waves, Bara Sapir. And today we have a special guest, once again joining us, Vinay Narang. Both of them are expert coaches in the domain of GMAT and testing and so forth. So this is really all about them today. I'm going to introduce myself really quickly. I'm the founder of Candidate Coach, which is a full-service admissions consulting firm, helping people apply and get into top MBA and master's programs all over the world. And that said, I'm going to turn over to Bara to introduce herself and City Test Prep.
Sure. I'm Bara Sapir. I'm CEO and founder of City Test Prep. We're a full-service, individualized tutoring program. We actually work with students, middle school through medical boards, but we've been teaching GMAT since, we've been teaching GMAT since 2005, and I've been working with the GMAT since about 96, something like that. Yep, I'm based in San Francisco. We have an office in New York too. Vinay, you're on.
You invented the GMAT. Here you go, Vinay.
Just the internet.
I'm Vinay. I'm the chief genius of GMAT Genius. We specialize in helping people prepare for the GMAT, specifically with private tutoring. And we've been doing this for about 15 years now, and we've had wonderful success having our clients go to all the top programs in the US and in different top European and Asian programs as well. We are really glad to, of course, work with Eric and Bara here on these wonderful sessions to share our knowledge, but we're based in Southern California, work with clients worldwide, and really our expertise is helping people push to those higher echelons of GMAT scores.
Thanks, Vinay. And I just have to ask, apart from being really, really modest, what does it mean to be being a genius?
Well, as our name is the chief genius, really means I'm running the company, developed all the curriculum, training all our tutors, managing that process. But, just a fancy title. The good news is when you have your own company, you get to name yourself whatever you want. So
Definitely. I love it. It's a great name. And by the way, I'm joining today from Miami, Florida, where I'm usually in Paris. So it's nice to be back home in my native US. And so let's just dive into the topic today. So before we get into the tips, let's maybe do a little overview of the test itself. People are coming to us with all different levels of understanding what the GMAT is, what it's for. So just a little overview of the test. What is the purpose of the test? Maybe an overview of the different sections involved and some general observations that you guys have had of the test over the years working in the industry. You guys can dissect that, tackle it as you wish.
Vinay, you're on. Why don't you?
Absolutely.
A large profile there, so why don't you go?
Absolutely. Well, the GMAT stands for the Graduate Management Admission Test. It's primarily used by MBA programs as a standardized test to help people end their application, distinguish that they've got the skills to do well within an MBA program. It is theoretically based on high school level math and English, but unlike another test well known, the SAT, it's really a much higher level test that tests critical thinking skills. And so to do well on the test, you need to not only know the relevant math rules, grammar rules, and so forth, but you need to know how to more strategically and creatively apply those rules to creatively, quickly solve a problem. And fundamentally, it is testing critical thinking skills, the type of skills you would need to do well within an MBA program, or frankly, to do well even in jobs you might have after your MBA program.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point because all of these admissions tests have gotten a beating this past, through COVID. I don't know if anyone's been following it, but certainly the SATs and the ACTs have become test optional. There are some schools that there's some business schools that don't even require the GMAT or the GRE at this point, but there's also schools that will accept the MCAT, which is the test for medical school, and will accept the GRE, and I've even heard of one for the LSAT. So really these tests are hoops that you need to jump through, and you need to learn what it is that the test wants you to understand about the topics at hand. And it's exactly what Vinay was talking about, where it really is about critical thinking and your reasoning skills. And each test, whether it's the GMAT or the MCAT or the LSAT, they're all having this lens of how would this person be as a lawyer? How would this person be as a business person in the case of the GMAT and the EA? The GRE is more like the SAT and the ACT on steroids, but the GMAT, it's really the one thing, or I should say the standardized tests that are admissions tests for business school, it's the one thing that the school can look at and compare you to every other student taking the test. It's standardized. So the irony and the cool thing about Vinay and myself is that we teach, we're individualized programs, right? There's big box programs that are really, they're great. They're good programs, but they're more general and they're not customized to the student. And then you go to the other end where you can look at something like Vinay and I do, and Vinay, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're really looking at what does the student need, what makes them tick, what's not working. And so the test is going to indicate who you are compared to all the other people who are taking that test over a period of time.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Bara. And I think that we have to understand and you'll speak well to this, Eric, it's a very competitive process applying to business school. There are, especially when you're looking for one of the top programs, there are really low admissions rates. I mean, we've got, even on the high end, Stanford has an admissions rate of less than 10%. So how do you distinguish yourself? You've got to understand that people who are applying to these programs, it's already self-selection. These people are already individuals who have excellent undergraduate experience, work experience. And so you really need a way to differentiate yourself. And a good way to differentiate yourself is with a standardized test. As Bara said, it's applicable across all candidates. Well, you can show that you've not only have the skills to do well, but that you've put in the effort. You're demonstrating to schools that you've put in the effort to show that you're able to achieve a high score, the same type of really thing they'd want to see that you'd be able to do within their classes.
I look at it both ways. I look at it as, if you get a really high score, it really shows off that you have worked, or that you know that information, or you can move through as a business professional, because it's really business professional kinds of metaphors, or just simulating things like, are you a risk taker or do you take calculated risks? But it also is just a hoop you have to jump through.
Yeah,
and for
true.
some students, their essays are going to shine. And so you just want them to just not be flagged by the admissions because their score is not high enough. So one thing students often, I tell every student, plan on taking the test at least twice, right? And, part of that is not only because you want to get your score as high as it can be, but also you want to demonstrate to admissions folks that you do care and that you're going to go back. It's a sign that this is meaningful for you, and that it's important enough that you will put in the effort between the first test and the second test to get a higher score if you need it. Like if you're getting a 780 on the first test, even like a 760, you don't really need to take it again, right? Unless there's a reason, unless there's a financial reason. For example, if you get a high score, some schools will look at that for scholarships. So, but it is a hoop for many students also that you just have to jump through.
From the admissions consulting side, we always tell people to budget the time for taking it at least twice, because most people do. And there's actually nothing wrong with that. As you were alluding to, I think most admissions people would agree that the fact that you've worked hard and improving your score is a good indicator of your personality. It speaks to your character. Right? That you're willing to invest the time to improve yourself and do something that's pretty much unpleasant and time consuming to stand out. And that speaks volumes. So there's no issue with taking it.
I will counter that. There's nothing unpleasant about the GMAT. It is fun. It's like, I think part of it is looking at it not as it's treacherous and just a pain in the ass, but really looking at it like, how could you have fun with this? It's like, I've often said this on the program, Eric, like it's a dance, right? Like you don't want to think of it as like a really horrible workout. You want to think of it like a dance. Right. And you want to think about it as each question that comes to you is an opportunity to show up for that question, rather than, oh gosh, I hate combinations. It's like, oh, great, combinations. You always surprise me. This is exciting. So you want to, we help our students to reframe, especially when they have baggage around certain types of questions or math or verbal.
That's a really important point, having the right mindset, positive mindset.
Absolutely. And it really just even carries over to going to business school. When you go to business school, you'll be taking lots of different classes, marketing, accounting, which I'm sure a lot of people don't like out there. You'll take finance, you'll take human resources. So ultimately, even in business school, you're going to get classes that might not be your favorite, but you're still going to have to show that you've got the wherewithal to buckle down, to get into the material and do well in the class. So even if the GMAT might not be your favorite thing, as it is for Bara and me, you still need to show that you're able to put in the work, that you're able to have a fun at it, and you're able to put in, as Bara said, the right attitude.
Well, I wouldn't say it's my favorite thing.
That's the MCAT, right?
I find the tests and I find test prep to be incredibly creative and interesting, and I enjoy it, right? I enjoy the way that this industry allows me to think. That's why I stay in it. But favorite, I mean, I actually really like GMAT students among the best of all the kinds of students that we have, because I find them to be they're so creatively thinking out of the box, because that's what you need to do as a business professional. Yeah. And they're also leaders, right? Like business school is leadership school. So I really do enjoy business school students quite a bit, but I like things more than the GMAT. I like travel.
You guys mentioned something really important, that like, especially with COVID, there's been a shift, maybe more flexibility in terms of the kind of tests schools are taking. Let's maybe get up to date on that, where we are now in 2022, hopefully the tail end of this global pandemic. And during COVID, the peak of it, a lot of people couldn't access test centers. There was talk of a lot of waivers. We even had an episode, is it wise to accept a waiver if one's presented to you, and the advantages of taking the test and so forth, as well as alternative tests that are accepted. Now, most schools still, and for a long time now, have accepted the GRE or the GMAT either way. But as you mentioned, sometimes MCAT, LSAT are options too, and they test different things. There's different sections. So I guess my question to you right now, just really quickly to touch on, is where are we now in terms of like flexibility and the kinds of tests you can take? And I just want to touch on the different sections that are in the GMAT for those who don't know.
Sure. I mean, I'll just say briefly that the way that the GMAT is now being administered is that you can take it at home or at a test center, and it's virtually the same test. It wasn't initially like it was like I think they didn't have the AWA section, the writing section, and they didn't have, the EA doesn't have geometry, but now the test is the same, but you have to decide if you might think that you've got creature comforts by, doing your test at home, but actually it could be a little nerve-wracking, because you have to kind of clear the space, make sure, like if you have an animal like that makes noise, like that could be a problem. So you could take it at either place. And the test has 4 main sections. It's got math or quant, verbal, AWA, which is writing, and the integrated reasoning, which is it's sort of a combination of verbal and math. It's data, how to manipulate data. And the math, what's interesting about the math is some of it is problem solving, which is direct questions, like here's the equation, or here's the situation, here's the problem, and then you have to come up with a solution, and there's one solution. And then there's something called data sufficiency, which this is my favorite part of the test. Okay, so, and most people hate it, but data sufficiency is really how you think through a question. And you don't, here's my creature is actually about to pop up here. Data sufficiency is, do you have enough data to be able to answer the question? Is it sufficient? And so you want to have a strategy to move through that. You want to have a strategy for all the kinds of questions on the test, because some questions you could be really elegant in how you answer, but there's not going to be anyone at the end of the test saying, hey, Eric, I noticed how you answered that really complicated geometry question. Let's talk about it, right? There's no one is going to say that. So you want to balance doing things with shortcuts that are reliable, and when you want to use them, and thinking through, even not necessarily answering the whole question, because you can figure out what it is just by the number in the ones place, for example. And when you really need to actually hunker down and really understand the interconnectedness between what the question's asking you. Vinay, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, first thing, since we're talking about tips, I'd actually like to offer a pro tip, adding something that Bara said. So you're right, you can take it either online or in person, but you can also take it both online and in person. And so actually, as a pro tip, there's normally a 16-day waiting period. If you take it in the test center, you want to take it again, there's a 16-day waiting period. You take it online, you want to take it again, there's a 16-day waiting period. However, if you take it across platform, there is no waiting period. So in fact, a lot of people are surprised by this, but I tell people, you take it at a test center, you weren't happy with your score, you don't want to wait 16 days. 2 days later, go take it online. There's no waiting period. So I think that is definitely a nice advantage and workaround of the waiting period, because if you've already prepared, you think you're ready, but for whatever reason it didn't go well on test day, you don't have to wait now. You can take it across platforms. So that's a big advantage. And I think, just echoing what Bara said, it really is about how do you strategically, all we care about is getting the right answer as quickly as possible. We don't care about doing a 10-page math proof. That's not what the test is about, and it's not what it's testing. So it really is testing our ability to take the information, assess what information we need, how can we quickly derive the right answer without doing a lot of work. And I think that's really what Bara meant by the shortcuts, being more strategic in how we approach the test.
And in being strategic, it's also understanding up to the test, all of your studying, all your diagnostics, where are your weak areas, right? Like, I think that there's something very self-soothing about constantly going to the things that work and the things that you don't have trouble with. But you actually want to push yourself to look at where you're getting things incorrect, why you're getting them incorrect. Is it careless mistake? Is it a knowledge gap? Is it that you're moving too fast or too slow? Like what is not working, and then fixing that.
And not only fixing it, but also recognizing that you don't need to get every question right. You don't need an 800 to get into any of these programs. You don't need to get every question right. So sometimes it's about saying, you know what, I'm really, for whatever reason, just struggling with coordinate geometry. Is it worth me investing a lot of time? Or you know what, maybe if I miss 1 or 2 coordinate geometry questions, there's not going to be that many of them, then maybe that's okay. So it's being strategic also about how you manage your time through the test. And let's make sure that we're not devoting an inordinate amount of time to one question, which results in us not having enough time to answer other questions that we can get right. So managing our time effectively.
Let's pop over to verbal. I feel like it's so easy to talk about math tips. I always do, and I always use them as an example. But I do want to say that with the verbal, the two things that I think are important for students to understand is that it's formal American written English that they're testing you on. More meaning, like as time has gone on, they're really more interested in if you understand the meaning of the sentence, but you really do need to know the grammar. And sometimes grammar is ugly, and sometimes, but it's still correct. So you want to study the actual things that you're going to be tested on the test, and it's delineated on lots of different sites. We don't have time to go over all of that, but you can find that information and know those points, and also know when it sounds super awkward. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it sounds super awkward. The second thing is timing. And like, I know that we teach speed reading because you want to move through things. You want to move things through the test quickly. And sometimes you get really hooked in the essays, and you're not going to be asked a lot about the essays. 80% of what you're tested on comes from 20% of what you read. So you really want to be able to move through essays quickly, understand where things are, and then go back to them for the questions that are being asked, and really be able to prove what your answer is. Not it feels right or it looks right. Like now, I'm sure that Vinay and I, it's like we can look at answers and be like, that doesn't sound like a right answer without even reading the essay. We've been doing it. He's been doing it for 15 or so years, plus probably more. And I've been doing it, a little bit longer. It's like, once you really understand how they make answers, you can pick them out. But most test takers are not going to be experts like that. What you need to be an expert at is being yourself, being your best self, and not being surprised when you go on the test, which means that you take as many diagnostics as you can, or look at as much material that's officially produced as possible.
And I think the key word you just said, Bara, is officially produced. So I think even more so on verbal than on quant, it's very important to use official GMAT materials published by the Graduate Management Admission Council. You can find them all on MBA.com. Of course, can purchase some of the books, like the official guides on other sources such as Amazon. But what we find is for verbal, if someone looks at third-party materials and relies too heavily on third-party materials, they're not always prepared for the GMAT, because sometimes it's hard to replicate the unique flavor of GMAT verbal questions in particular. So making sure that you're using the right materials, the right sources, is an important part of the preparation. And I think also an important tip for people out there. I've had people, even what Bara said about the practice tests. So sometimes I'll have someone come to me and say, oh, well, I took this practice test and I got a 650. And I say, great, what practice test was it? And, oh, it was well, I don't want to
Don't
name
say
names.
it. Don't say it.
I don't want to name names, but I'll say, great, go take an official GMAT practice test, and they'll come back. Oh, actually, that's more like a 500. Well, that's really where you're at.
Or it could be more like a 700.
Yes,
right? Because
depending on which practice test you use. Yes.
It just using the official material means that you're getting more acclimated and more attuned to what the test writers are putting forward. And it's happening on a conscious level and it's happening on an unconscious level. So it's important to expose yourself as much as possible to that.
So in terms of getting the official material, I always understood you can download 2 free full exam simulations, right? As well as I think it's 50 practice questions. Beyond that, what's your best suggestion to get more content? There workarounds for free stuff, or it's just about paying for it?
You need to invest in the official guide, the most recent one, and the supplements. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a very big advocate of using official GMAT materials. As you said, Eric, there are 2 completely free practice tests. It's actually 90 practice questions that are included with that. And that's completely free to everybody. You just go create a free account on MBA.com, which is the official GMAT website. You need to create an account. There are anyways to take the GMAT. That's where you register for the exam. In addition, there are 4 paid practice tests put out by the makers of the GMAT exam. Now, those are $50 for 2 practice tests or $90 for 4 additional paid practice tests. So in total, you can have 6 official GMAT practice tests. You also have the ability to reset those exams. Now, you will see repeat questions if you reset them. So if you do reset them and retake them, ideally it's with a passage of time. In other words, you run through all 6 official tests first, and then you can reset and retake them. Hopefully with a passage of time, you might not see the same questions, or if your skills have improved, because it's an adaptive test, question difficulty varies based on how we're doing. If you've improved and now at a higher level, you will see different questions that way as well. As Bara said, the official guides for GMAT review are an excellent source of practice questions. There are 3 books. There's the main official guide and 2 supplementary quantitative and verbal official guide that don't overlap. There's also a book called Official Advanced Questions, which has an additional 300 non-overlapping hard difficulty practice questions. And they're really very reasonably priced, I think. To Bara's point, you have to invest in these materials. They're not that expensive relative to the cost of pursuing an MBA.
Or not getting a huge scholarship thanks to your competitive score.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I thought I'd throw this to you guys. I'm thinking of 2 different profiles, right? Clients or potential clients that I might be dealing with. One is someone who's looking to do their MBA within the next 5 years. For sure, they're going to apply, right? Knowing that the deadline or the expiry date of a GMAT score is 5 years, right? So let's say this person is going to do it 3 to 4 years from now. So the approach to preparation for the GMAT from 0 versus someone who's I'm applying this year, I'm doing my research, my applications, my essays, and the GMAT while working at the same time. Let's take these 2 kind of profiles and dissect them. What's the best way to go about it?
Go ahead, Vinay.
Yeah, I'll be happy to jump in. So I think you're right. You have to look at your timeline because there is no one size fit all. I mean, to Bara's point, that's why we really need to be able to look at a specific candidate and offer advice that is specific to that person's needs. It's not one size fits all. So for someone who has, actually for everybody, my first step always, without exception, to someone who has not already done so is to take an official GMAT practice test, because we need to understand where the person's at, what are relative strengths and weaknesses. And I know sometimes there is apprehension towards taking a practice test. Sometimes they're afraid of what the result's going to be, but I'd rather know that up front, and the candidate should rather know that up front so that they can prepare accordingly.
Well, you'll be happy to understand that I always tell people the same thing. Take it right away. The result's going to be horrible, but you'll get that baseline score that will give you a more nuanced answer in terms of where you need to focus your time and preparation.
What I would add to that is that I think the official test, super diagnostic, super important, but we deal with the 4 pillars of learning, which is content, strategy, mindset, and time management. So we actually have an intake. Vinay, you might have an intake also. Ours really looks at the psychological profile of the student and how they feel taking tests, because you could know everything on a GMAT, but if you don't feel confident and focused when you go in to take high stakes tests, you can actually not perform to your potential. So we look at that, and we also look at reading speed. And to your point, Eric, most people like this, I tell them, yeah, the worst is over. This is the lowest you're ever going to score. And it also gives the student an opportunity to look at the questions that they answered incorrectly, to say, you know what, I actually remember knowing that. That's going to be easier for them to learn. Or I have no idea what this is. Or I knew this, why did I get it wrong? Right? Or I completely guessed, or I didn't have time. So it really reveals a lot more than just what you see on the test itself. And it gives us an opportunity to really evaluate. We actually have a formal evaluation process. We also have a quiz that we give the students in addition to the official. And then from there, we're able to gauge how long a student needs to study. And in looking at the timeline of those two test cases that you're talking about, if someone is starting, people are not necessarily starting from ground zero, right? Some people are, they actually are going to be strong in one or the other. There are some that are going to have to, really get back into the basics, like times tables. But, for an average student, it's really identifying their weaknesses and then looking at their calendar and saying, for the student who's going to be applying in 5 years, it's like, when are they going to have a good 2 or 3 months? Like, that's a good chunk of time to think about, to actually study and not be overwhelmed by other things. For the student that's working and has all of these other pieces and writing their essays, like, they're going to have to fit it in and know that between these two extreme cases that you're talking about, there's a lot of people in the middle, and they're not exceptional. Like, you're talking about these cases, these are the people that come to us. Often what I find is that when students have a lot of time, they often pick the most low-priced option to study because they feel that, oh, like, I've got time and I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna DIY. And that we often get a lot of students like that because they don't want to put the money towards the tutoring. And ultimately, you are getting what you pay for. If you're paying for something that's a big box program, it's going to be a much more loose and open, uncustomized situation. So you want to be careful. You might be fine with that. Like, there's nothing wrong with those programs. I worked at the Princeton Review, and it's a great program. If you're looking to get into the highest score levels, though, you might need fine tuning. You might need finishing school. So even if you do a big box program, consider in your budget and in your time a month or so, 2 weeks, a month, to actually go into the fine tuning of your score performance.
Yeah, I think looking at those two profiles that you mentioned, Eric, to Bara's point, yes, there's a danger when you have a very far off deadline to let it drag on. And, the reality is, yes, the score is good for 5 years. You don't want it to drag on. You want to choose, as Bara said, a 2 to 3 month period, ideally, where it's relatively low stress, low commitment, you can focus. And let's get it done in a structured way so it doesn't drag on indefinitely. And in a structured way means using the right resources, the right materials, keeping yourself accountable with a timeline, and not just saying, oh, well, this week I've got this party to go off to, so let me not study this week. And that's dangerous. It's got to be a disciplined, continuous, concentrated program because you want to get it done with. You don't want it to drag on indefinitely. On the other hand, the individual who's got that short time frame with a lot of other commitments, it's very challenging, as Bara said. You have to make sure you can find the time. And sometimes you also have to prioritize. You have to say, okay, well, if this is my deadline, this is how much time I have. I always try to get, as I'm sure you do, Bara, a realistic sense of how much time somebody can put in. There's no point in me saying, okay, you need to do this, this, and this week. And then we come back 1 week later and I said, how much have you got done? Oh, only 10% of what you told me. Well, that doesn't serve any purpose. So sometimes we'll have to prioritize and say, realistically, you're not going to be able to get everything covered in this short amount of time. So let's, as Bara said, focus on your weaknesses. Where can we improve the most within the limited time to see the biggest bang for the buck, so to speak, from the time you have?
Yeah, we look at the highest yield topics, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're going to spend more time on sentence correction, let's say, if that's an issue, then we might be with the arguments. Like, we're going to really spend time where with sentence correction, if you study these particular things, you're more likely to get more right more quickly, right? So it's going to be a better use of time.
You're talking about low-hanging fruit, basically, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the biggest deal, I mean, just to give a real life example with a candidate that I'm working right now. So we've been working together for about a month and a half. He started out with a 630. His latest practice test now is a 750. But he wants to take the test next month in May. And looking at his latest practice test, where was the biggest problem? Sentence correction. So I said, that's literally got to be our number one priority. Now, there's a danger, I think, in saying, oh, let's focus on sentence correction exclusively. You don't want to do that. You have to do enough practice to maintain your skills, to keep it strong in this person's case, quant and critical reasoning, reading comprehension. Don't ignore those. I've seen people make that mistake. They say, oh, I'm great in this area. Let's ignore it. They don't study it. 2 months later, that area tanks.
Yep.
But in this person's case, we got to, while maintaining those other areas, focus more on sentence correction to try to pull that up even further.
Yeah, and the other thing that students really need to focus on, I mentioned this before, is what's their mindset, right? Because no matter how much you study, you want to go into the test strong. You want to go into the test confident, focused, and having taken enough diagnostic tests so that you can actually see exactly what you're going to score in the day of the test, right? There should be no surprises. So yes, mindset is key, Suzanne. I didn't know we had that feature.
Yeah, I'm just figuring it out right now.
Yeah, so figuring out how to get into the best mindset. It's not just saying, I want to have a great mindset. Some of that is also a muscle that you need to exercise. So
absolutely,
we use growth mindset, we use hypnosis, we use neurolinguistic programming, we use a whole bunch of different skills that we teach the students that need it in order to get into the best mindset.
Also, to your point, Vinay, about being disciplined and structured and not letting it drag out. Like sometimes I've met people on the road back when I was working as a director of recruitment. People like, yeah, I'm going to study for the GMAT this and next year. I'm like, geez, that sounds awful. Like it's like slowly ripping off a Band-Aid. You want to get it done. Know the time that it should take. Based on, I would say, are you a native English speaker is a big part of it, and what you've done for work. If you're an engineer, you're probably quite strong in math in the quant section. So assessing yourself is a good first step, along with that first diagnostic. But then coming up with the time frame, sticking to it, being disciplined, and not letting it drag out. So listen, speaking of dragging out, we've come to 32 minutes into the episode, and so I want to give each of you an opportunity for another tip or two before we wrap it up, if that's okay.
I guess a tip that I would have is that you want to actually have balance. Like you don't, even though it's going to be a very stressful time, that you want to make sure you're sleeping enough. You want to make sure that you're eating good food. You want to make sure that you're getting fresh air. We're in a funny time now where COVID it's still with us, but you want to take care of yourself as much as possible, but you want to be able to socialize a bit more. So having balance so that you're not completely myopic in your vision of preparing is going to help you prepare better, because you need to have time away from studies in order to do better on your studies. That's just how the brain works.
So you need to be able to process what it's just absorbed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I'd completely agree with that, Bara. Sleep is so important. A couple of things that I would add. One is, especially to your point, Eric, about the engineer already being good at math, sometimes there's a danger in estimating one's abilities, especially for those who are perhaps an engineer, because sometimes they think, oh, it's just a straightforward application of math. Well, no, it's not. It's about creative thinking skills. And so even for the engineer, you're going to be applying perhaps your math knowledge in a different way. And sometimes that surprises people. And so they are a little bit shocked at what their math result is on that first practice test when they take it. I'd say the second big one is when we think about practice, it's got to be quality over quantity. And so what that means is it's not just the sheer number of practice questions that you're doing, but are you doing the questions the right way? In other words, are you going back after you've done the questions and thoroughly review them? To Bara's point before, have you understand what mistakes you've made? Was it a careless mistake? Did I not understand this concept? Need to dive into it more. Was my approach wrong? Why did I miss that question? What is the right way? Let's redo that question perhaps 1 or 2 weeks later to make sure that we really have learned what we need to learn to do that question the right way, but really putting in the effort to learn as much as we can from all the practice that we're doing, as opposed to just doing a sheer quantity of practice without learning from it.
Totally. We just got a question from a LinkedIn user. I don't know if you guys can see that on your screen, but I'll read it just in case. This person asks, any advice when you are a week or less out from your exam?
Absolutely. So the hope is that when you're a week or so away, you're close to where you want to score. And of course, the way you measure that is with practice exams. So assuming that you're where you need to be or want to be, I think the biggest thing is you're not going to learn a lot of new material in that last week that's going to really make the difference. I think what's more important is reinforcing the knowledge you already have. And so I tell people, go back and redo every practice test question, et cetera, that you've missed before to ensure that you now know how to do those questions and that you solidify the knowledge that you should have in your original practice.
So it's not about learning fresh new things, but about just reviewing what you've already learned.
Yeah, and solidifying that knowledge.
Right, sure.
Yeah,
right.
I would say that. And also you want to go into the test, and this is going to be the third time I'm saying it, so it's super important, is that you want to go into the test so in a way that you're not nervous and that there's no surprises. So you do what Vinay just said, but you also want to be at peace with yourself, knowing that whatever you've done up to that point, whatever it is, whether it's a little or it's a lot, that you've done what you've done and you feel good about it. If you don't feel good about it, you might need to do it again, but you want to feel confident in what you've put into it up to that point, so that you go in as a blank canvas, able to confront each question and be in the zone as much as possible. And if there's anything that's not working, certainly it's better to do that a week ahead of time rather than the day before, but you just want to at least be at peace with going in to take the test.
Yeah. And I think to what Bara also said before, it's so important that I'm going to emphasize what Bara said again. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. So don't start staying up late, studying for the last minute, trying to cram. Get sleep, be well rested when you go into the exam day.
And no surprises, don't break up with someone. Yeah. Don't get into a torrid love affair. Don't change your eating habits. Don't quit or start smoking, right? This is not the time to be experimental and adventurous. You really want everything to be even keeled.
Yeah.
Guys, your tips have been fantastic. Thank you so much. This is going to round off our episode for today. Thank you for the questions from the audience and comments. Just a quick bit about next week. On MBA Waves, we have an episode with guest speaker John Jaramillo, who is the founder and leadership performance coach from Coach It Out. And the topic is networking with class. So I'm really looking forward to that one next week. By the way, if any of you want to suggest any episode themes for the upcoming ones, have a look at MBAwaves.com, see what's coming up anyway. We're happy to hear from you either here or on the website. You can reach any of us, or LinkedIn, of course. And our emails are also visible. Sorry, our websites are also visible. Actually, Vinay's, yours is not. Is it GMATgenius.com?
GMATgenius.com.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right, that's enough for me today. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Have a good day, everyone. Thanks, Vinay.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, guys. Everybody enjoy yourself. Wonderful episode again.
Bye.